Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we leap back in time to the age of Obama, netbooks, and the Black Eyed Peas to revisit some of the most notable brands, marketing, and pop culture of 2009.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, where we simplify the world of marketing for humans. I'm Shad Conley, and with me is my co-host, Patrick 2019 Jebber.
2019, man. What do you think?
I think finally your nickname makes sense.
Patrick 2019 Jebber. For so long, I was out of sorts. I was a man before my time, literally.
Yeah. In 2017, people were like, I don't get it. What are you doing here?
And now it just all makes sense. People just high-five me in the streets. They're like, Patrick, 2019 Jebber, what's going on?
Now, finally, your time has arrived.
People put me on their shoulders like in the movie Rudy and carry me around. Not a football field, but just the streets.
It's perfect. It makes it hard for you to get anywhere.
It does.
But, it's cool. It's still cool.
I have to put on disguises basically when I go out in public, so.
It's tough for you. It's going to be an interesting year, though. So we thought, what better way to celebrate, 2019 than by going back to a completely different year a decade ago?
It's amazing. There's a lot of change that happens in 10 years.
A lot of things shift around in a decade, A lot rattles.
Yeah. And I think more so now because of technology than maybe, like 50 years ago, probably not that much changed within 10 years.
Yeah, you're like, 10 years ago, I'm still using my wired phone to make my phone calls. Love how things move so slow.
I like to pulse dial.
I prefer the pulse to the tone because it takes more time. Pulse was the worst.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But you know what? I do kind of miss it, right? There was something oddly satisfying about putting your finger in there and then I don't know. There was something, as the kids say today when they play with slime, it was oddly satisfying. It's true. It's a thing. It's a thing they say now.
That's what they say, huh?
Yeah. Satisfying.
2019.
Yeah. So I thought I'd share a statistic most people would relate to from 2009, since most people are on or have been on or know someone on Facebook. I know that because you don't have a social media platform with 2.27 billion monthly active Facebook users without affecting, a majority of the world. Mm-hmm. So here's a little walk down memory lane. Facebook only had 1 million users at the end of 2004, okay? So 2004, obviously the beginning of Facebook. They essentially doubled their numbers each year from there to 2009. And then they went from 150 million users in January 2009 to 350 million by the end of 2009. So they more than doubled at that point. And then this time frame was when the 35 to 50-year-old segment grew like wildfire. It grew roughly by 175% during the 2008-2009 timeframe, which is crazy. It's insane that it was only 10 years ago. 15 years ago, they only had 1 million.
Yeah, it's, completely nuts when you're talking about those numbers and how they have changed. This is actually what I put for what's one thing you remember that was different about this time period from now. Social media at that time, Facebook was just making this big leap. It had been around for a few years, but it was just hitting the mainstream where it was at the point where, your parents were starting to grab it and stuff like that. And it was just such a different perspective on social than we have now, where it's become, almost such a burden. It's been around us for so long, and we just think about all these negative things and hear all these negative things. And at this time, back in 2009, it was still fun and new and exciting. I remember we were working in the work world. Companies at the time, they were first starting to feel compelled to get involved with social media. But at the same time, they were also terrified of it.
Yeah.
because they're all like, what is this? How do we do it? I'm afraid to say anything on here. What are the legal ramifications? You know, it was such a different time period, but the curiosity of it and the exploration of it was still kind of fun and exciting, and just growth and how it took off. And at that time, there wasn't an Instagram. That didn't come along till 2010. Snapchat was a ways off. So it was basically Facebook. Twitter was just starting to grow like wildfire. I think in 2009, I have that they had 18 million users, which for context, they're at around 325 million now. But they were growing fast. Facebook and Twitter were the ones everybody was talking about. And it was all new ground, and there was fun in that exploration factor to it that was much different than where we are at now with those things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was still in the early days. People talked about it differently. It wasn't about the scandals that we have today. It was people talking about, oh, are you on Facebook? And the dilemma if they were going to sign up and what it was all about at that point. It's kind of surreal when you think about smartphones were still pretty new then too. You know, the first iPhone only came out about a year and a half prior to that. So it was still the wild west of the mobile phone explosion, you know, the smartphone explosion. And then this was a really difficult year to flash back to because you figure we were just coming out of what's been coined the 2008 financial crisis. It was a pretty turbulent time. People were losing their homes and what I would consider a really kind of dark time just 10 years ago, where people were very uncertain about the future because of those, at least the financial crisis by itself, you know?
Yeah, it was a lot of, where is this all going? What's going to happen here? You couldn't quite tell what the future was going to look like. You know, it was just one of those periods in time where, looking back on that, maybe that's why it's even hard to remember exactly what was going on. That being said, do you remember where you were in life, what you were doing in 2009? Can you place it at all?
That's even difficult. You know, my kids were still pretty little. So honestly, that part of my life was really crazy because it's a blur. You know, when they're little, you're just kind of like putting out fires, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they were both really close in age. So my kids were the big part of my life at that point.
And that's when time really starts to blend together too. Once you have kids, you know, especially once you have multiple kids, time just starts flying. It's like it's put in a blender and it all goes together, and you're looking back on like even 2 years ago and you're like, was that 2 years ago? Was that last week?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even today, it's still just to be like, oh, I know where I'm going today. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, definitely.
So
let me tell you a little bit about where I was at in 2009. Bear with me for a minute. In August of 2008, I moved to Akron, Ohio. As my future wife, then my girlfriend, starts going to school there. I'm working remotely as a copywriter, get laid off. You know, economic crisis hits the company. I get laid off from that job. I go looking for another job that I end up starting in January of 2009. That is when, Patrick, I meet you for the first time and we start working together in the corporate world. So did you know this is actually our 10-year anniversary?
I didn't realize that was 2009. I thought that was before that for some reason.
Nope, January 2009, when I looked it up.
I feel like I totally missed our anniversary.
I'm pretty upset. It's pretty messed up.
I need to take you out to dinner, wine you and dine you.
There's not much you can do to make up for this.
I feel so awful. But it's a decade.
I know.
We've been together for a decade.
For a decade, 10 years, before this pod was even a glimmer in our eyes. Pretty crazy, pretty crazy. Let's continue our journey back in time here. In a minute, we'll hop in the DeLorean and head back a decade to share our picks for the marketing highlights of 2009. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's sponsor is Farmers Insurance. Insurance can be confusing, overwhelming, and time-consuming. At Hire Insurance Agency, we remove the guesswork and hassle, helping you protect what matters most. We offer a wide range of auto, home, business, and life insurance policies to help you meet your specific needs. Call 844-543-3463 or visit hireinsurance.com. That's HYRE insurance.com for more information.
Hey everybody, Game Show Bob here with today's Advertising Trivia Challenge. Speaking Human Trivia is the name and Advertising Trivia is the game. So if you consider yourself to be the sultan of slogans, here's your chance to test your knowledge. Last week's question was, which company used the slogan, "It gives you wings"? A. Continental Airlines. B. Buffalo Wild Wings. C. Red Bull. Or D. Goodyear Tires. And the answer is C. Red Bull. Fun fact, Red Bull's slogan, "It gives you wings," just didn't fly when it lost a $13 million class action lawsuit that accused the brand for false advertising. Yes, Red Bull literally does not give you wings. While it was assumed that most people understood that little wings didn't really sprout out of their shoes after drinking the beverage, the brand did use words like wings, boost, and flying imagery that gave the consumers possible misconceptions of physical enhancements. And that's it for today's little taste test of Speaking Human Trivia. This week's question is, who uses the slogan, "Eat Fresh"? The choices are A. Chiquita Banana, B. Sun-Kissed Oranges, C. Fresh and Easy Neighborhood Market, or D. Subway. Think you know the answer? Visit speakinghuman.com/trivia to find out if you are truly a trivia master.
Is this real life?
Yeah, this is real life.
Okay, now I have 2 fingers.
Good.
No, 4 fingers.
4 fingers?
That was a clip from David After Dentist, a viral video that captured the eyes of the internet viewers back in 2009. Like that, Jem, we're going to dig up some other great relics as we share memorable items from 2009 in the following categories: brands, marketing, tech, and pop culture. All the things you've come to expect from Speaking Human. Yes. So let's head back to 2009 now.
Whoa!
Did you feel that? Did you feel through my voice I was projecting us backwards?
I can't believe we're here in 2009. It's so crazy.
Wow. It's really nice to meet you, Shad.
Nice to meet you too, Patrick. I think one day we'll have a radio show on the internet together.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So we're going to share some picks for memorable items from 2009 in each of these categories that I mentioned. So the first one is brand. What is a brand that stuck out to you in 2009, Chad?
This was a tough one for me. What I actually ended up coming up with is not necessarily a brand that's definitive of 2009, like what I was initially thinking, but it's a really great story that takes place in 2009 featuring a brand. Okay?
Okay, all right.
So the brand I chose is Tropicana, maker of orange juice.
Okay.
And I chose this just because I thought it was a really interesting brand story that fits well with this show here. So here's what happened to Tropicana in 2009. Tropicana made the decision to change their branding and packaging. Not a big deal there, right? Happens all the time. Mm-hmm. So they launched the new packaging in January 2009 and invested $35 million in an advertising campaign to promote the new packaging in North America. Now, one of the things they decided to do was remove the iconic imagery they had of an orange with a straw in it. Do you know what image I'm talking about? The Tropicana, the orange with the straw?
Yeah.
Well, that change proved cataclysmic. According to Branding Journal, a few days after the launch, consumers started criticizing the new design on social networks, which was a fairly new thing at the time. And 2 months later, sales dropped by 20%, which represented a loss of $30 million for Tropicana.
Wow.
So what'd they do? Quickly went back to the old packaging, and to this very day, 10 years later, the orange with the straw in it, still on the packaging.
Yeah, they're not going to make that mistake again, right? After $30 million.
That's forever, I think.
Yeah, they're going to be like, yeah, we're not ever going to be that dumb. Well, you know, the thing is, like, you don't know until you do something like that it's going to have that big of an impact. But I'll tell you, what better way to show the freshness of your product than to have a straw in the product that you're selling? I mean, it's like sipping a fresh orange. I mean, it seems obvious, right? That is such a powerful statement, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And within that category, the orange juice category, that is by far the most memorable thing any brand has done. That's the most memorable piece of branding. If you ask anybody, name one thing about any orange juice company you remember, something about the logo other than them just being orange, it's going to be the orange with the straw in it.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a great story. One of these interesting branding tales that just a reminder of these things you don't necessarily think of, but how important the familiar is, how powerful these brand associations are.
That's very true. For me, I was looking back and I was trying to think, one of the things I pulled up, the top 10 brands from 2009. Number 1 was Coca-Cola that year, IBM, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson. Nokia was still on the list in 2009. You don't see Nokia anymore. Google was 7 on that list that year. And all that aside, I kept thinking, I get it. Those are all on the list. Apple wasn't there. Apple was like 20, I think, on the list in 2009. So that gives you some context to, the changes that have happened in the technology world or brand world. But it was one little tiny brand that I stumbled across when I was going through the research that I thought, yeah, that's the thing I want to talk about. Guitar Hero. You remember Guitar Hero?
Oh, yeah.
So Guitar Hero was originally released in 2005, so it wasn't like it was released in 2009, but it was still a pretty big brand in 2009. And that brand had an original budget of $1 million, and overall, the Guitar Hero series has sold more than 25 million units worldwide, earning $2 billion retail. Now, Activision claimed the series to be the third largest game franchise in 2009 after the Mario and Madden NFL franchises. But, if you look back, Guitar Hero was in its prime still then. I don't know, just one of those brands that I think people go, oh yeah, Guitar Hero.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing. We had this. I remember buying this. We'd hang out with friends on like a Saturday night and I'll play Guitar Hero. It was like a thing. That's what it was. And like everybody was doing that, It was like a wide range of ages of people doing that too. You know what I mean? You had like people who are like 50 years old playing Guitar Hero. It seems now you look back on it, you're like, it's kind of weird. It's definitely a trend of the moment, but it was in that moment a big thing.
Back in 2009, 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, that was a big brand.
Yeah, it was actually a lot of fun to do. And they had, they licensed popular songs. And it was always funny when people were like, I think I could really play guitar. I'm really good at Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Not the same thing at all.
Not at all.
That's a fun thing to think about. I can even remember we bought that set, the full set. You get the drums, the guitar, the bass, whatever. Used it for a while, and then it's one of those things after 2 years of collecting dust in the basement, we're like, what do we do with this thing?
Yeah, I actually still have one in the garage somewhere. I don't even know anybody would want that.
Maybe you like melt it down into like an art piece.
It could be an art piece, actually.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So moving on, what about advertising or marketing efforts? What were some things that you pulled out from 2009?
Well, there's a big one that stuck out like a sore thumb, and I don't know if this is what you thought of too, or you were trying to stay away from this, but 2009 is the year of the Apple, there's an app for that, the iPhone 3G commercial, which to me is one of the iconic commercials of my lifetime anyway. This was a commercial promoting the App Store, which at the time was nearing around 100,000 apps. For context, today there's over 2 million. I'm not sure how many exactly, but people didn't know what apps were. That's the crazy thing. At the time, nobody was using the word app. We weren't all familiar with apps. When somebody said that, you were like, what is an app? I don't know what that is. I don't know why I want that. It just wasn't part of our collective vocabulary. Through this commercial and, this campaign in general, this is how that was established. Apple laid the foundation for that. They told us what applications were, what apps were, why they were valuable, how they had a whole bunch of them, and that's one of the things that made the iPhone great. And it's what helped take the iPhone to the next level. It was just a key commercial, and you knew it permeated the culture because it's one of those things you would hear people say, or it got parodied 100 times over, and you still hear people talk about it today.
That's so true. You can't deny the power and impact that that brand had back in 2009. I mean, you just can't. Like I said at the beginning, year and a half in from first iPhone coming out, you had the iPhone 3GS that came out that year. But yeah, the App Store, I mean, I'm so glad you put that on there because, you think back, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it seems like a million years ago that apps were not a thing yet.
It's one of those things, if you talk to most people in, say, 2007 and you said, yeah, I have an app that does that, they would be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. It wasn't part of a vernacular yet, right? Yeah, I oddly enough had something that I think you'll appreciate. I had QR codes were big in 2009.
Oh, yeah, very good one. The future is QR codes.
Yeah. They were big in 2009, I said, or at least marketers and advertisers wanted them to be. You know, QR codes, for our listeners, were developed in Japan as a means of tracking car parts. And QR codes are highly complex barcodes, basically came into the marketing advertising world to take people to a specific web page. People would put them on signs, or they'd put them on direct mail pieces, or they'd even put them on websites to take you to another website.
Oh, so bad. So bad. I haven't thought about or used QR codes in a long time.
I see them occasionally and I go, really? They're using QR codes? Anyway, so whatever. All that aside, you know, big in 2009 QR codes. Also, specifically, I had advertising efforts. Babies were really popular that year. The E-Trade babies, the Evian roller babies, if you remember those.
I do. That's my honorable mention. That was my second pick I had, is these strangely popular, not very good, digitally rendered Evian babies that people just loved. You know, it was in the early days of commercials really going viral on the internet. That was one of them that people went wild for.
Well, a lot of people took those babies and then made them dance to other music, which is a testament to social media at that point, and over the years, how that people have cannibalized, you know, videos to make them something new and different.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff was just starting to happen at this point.
Yeah. The last thing I was just going to touch on was GoDaddy was still in Super Bowl commercials back then. That year, the Danica Patrick commercial in the Super Bowl had her taking a shower because some college kid created a website, and he was boasting that he could do anything now that he did a website. That included spying on Danica Patrick in the shower, which is totally weird.
Some of those, like, would that ad even get a green light from the network now? You know, would they even let them do something like that now?
No, I don't think so at all. And, you know, that's what's so weird, that it was totally fine back then. And people were like, oh, Danica naked in the shower and these kids are spying. You look back and go, and that was okay?
You know, I would even say maybe 5 years ago, that shift has happened even more recent than that, where we're like taking another look at these things and we're like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Things have turned in such a way now that, I can't even imagine that getting on the air now.
Yeah. Very different world. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, you have a lot of great stuff there. You know, there's a lot of interesting, like, technology and interesting marketing techniques and stuff like that. I love the QR codes, just thinking about that, because everybody at the time, you remember, everybody was like, we got to put a QR code on it. And I'm like, isn't it easier for somebody just to go to a website? No, they got to do the QR code. We got to have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing, right? You had to download an app, scan the QR code, and then you were just basically taking them to a web page.
And most of the time, you know, there wasn't even much there. It was just like doing it to do it. Good stuff all around, though. Yeah, it's fun. Flashing back is fun.
I know. It's a trip down memory lane. So what do you have for tech products then of 2009? Anything that stood out, or tech?
A big one that kind of stuck out, and there's some overlap here. This is going back a little bit to your Guitar Hero talk. So a big one that stuck out for me was the Nintendo Wii. 2009 was peak Wii. The Wii actually came out in 2007, but 2009 was the year that Wii Mania reached its top point. The peak of the mountain, anyway. This is when they sold the most units, 26 million, and it was the thing you had to have. Part of that was associated with Rock Band, but the other part of that was just this gaming system that did something else. You know, it was more physical. You're playing tennis, you're bowling, you're swinging your arms around. In some ways, it was marketed as a fitness device. You know, you could do this in ways to exercise or get fit. They had a balance board. They were trying to get elderly people to use this. And it was this little kind of mania that it was young couples, it was kids, it was families, it was elderly people. They all wanted the Wii. They were all buying the Wii. It was the thing you were seeing news stories about every night, was the different ways people were using the Wiis in these community centers or these different places. You know, it was just the thing of the moment. It was more than a video game system. That was the way it was sold, or the narrative that built up around it. That was my tech product that I remember as being definitive of 2009.
Looking back, hindsight, it was the last of the, at least so far, of the big gaming consoles that really had people in an uproar, of we have to have that. We have to have that.
What about the Switch?
I mean, I think the Switch is a very popular Nintendo, but I don't know if the Switch is as popular as the Wii was.
I don't think so. I don't think it has that kind of, if you were around in 2009, there was this sort of, I don't want to say hysteria, but kind of like that. One of those things where you're seeing these news stories all the time about the Wii, and it just kind of like seeps into the culture and it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, if I remember correctly, stores were sold out of the Wii. You could not find them. I don't think that ever happened with the Switch. But as a product category, that year, 2009, was very big with e-book readers. So you had Amazon's Kindle. The Kindle 2 came out in 2009, physical buttons and all.
People weren't ready to give up their buttons yet.
No. There were still some smartphones that had physical buttons back then. The Barnes & Noble's Nook came out that year. That one actually didn't have any physical buttons, and it didn't do so well. And I think because of that, it was a little ahead of its time. But the book readers in general, I think, were a really big tech product of that year. And then you mentioned this on a previous podcast, the Sonos.
Yeah.
That year, they released their first all-in-one single speaker system that was compatible with the iPhone, iPod Touch. The second part of that, iPod Touch, was still a thing, right?
I bought one in 2009.
I know how much you love Sonos, and you had an iPod Touch that year. And then the last thing, I just have to say this. The Zune was still around. So they had the Zune HD that year.
What?
Yes. I think that was the last one. That was the death of the Zune. I saw a review somewhere and it said, Microsoft finally made the Zune sexy with this year's Zune HD. Hilarious, right? Because we all know the ultimate demise of the Zune. But interesting, to think that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. I've got a few honorable or toss-outs too. One of them also from Microsoft, Bing. This was the year we were heavily marketed, the big push for Bing to challenge Google. Didn't quite live up to it, I don't think.
Bada bing, bada boom. It's gone.
Still around. I think it's still around, right? Just nobody really uses it.
Yeah, people still talk about it. They're like, did you Bing that? No.
Nah, I don't Bing a whole lot.
Did I what? Did I what it?
But they had a lot of, if you remember, they did a lot of advertising. They were like, you want to try this? This is better than Google. And you're like, no, it's not. Also, Redbox. This was 2009 is about peak Redbox. I found a New York Times article from this time about how Redbox is totally disrupting the DVD market. That didn't last long before, Netflix came along and changed everything. Hope you enjoyed it while it lasted, Redbox.
And I think the key to what you just said was disrupting the DVD market. When was the last time you bought a DVD, Shad? Just be honest.
I don't remember. The last time I actually bought one?
Yeah. Do you remember the last time you bought a DVD?
No, I can't. It's been over that amount of time.
Yeah.
I might have bought one. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I bought like a kid's movie or something when I saw one cheap.
That's what I'm saying. The DVD market's not even a thing anymore.
Yeah.
So, anyway, sorry.
Well, they disrupted something only to get disrupted immediately after. Yeah. Usually you get to ride the wave a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of wave, that leads me to my last one. Do you remember Google Wave at all? If you don't, you're not alone. But in 2009, it was Google's next big product. It was a collaboration tool that they got people excited about. They had exclusive invites. People on Twitter were like trying to get a code to be invited to try out Google Wave. And I think about a year later or so, Google abandoned it.
I do remember that. What's the description of that product?
A software framework for real-time collaborative editing online.
Yeah, okay.
Originally developed as Google Wave and announced at the Google conference on May 27, 2009.
Google. The one thing I'll say about Google is I'm never quite sure, will that thing stay around? Will they abandon that? Look, this year we're talking about Google Plus gone kaput, right? So
Plus, Hangouts, there has been a lot of them, and people go kind of gaga for them for like 2 seconds, and then zoop.
Yeah, and then Zune, it's gone. Ooh, that.
And then like the Zune, it disappears. And that one guy's like, but the Zune is awesome, dude.
The Zune, man. Don't you want one of those? So pop culture, what do you think about pop culture? Movies, TV, music, sports, any big things that stuck out?
Far and away, there was one that just floated above all the rest, much like a three-dimensional thing flying in the air above you, and that was Avatar. It's hard to explain to people who just watched the movie Avatar on TV now why it was such a phenomenon when it came out in 2009. The movie's good, don't get me wrong. It's a really good movie, and it's fun to watch. But if you watch it on TV, you don't necessarily say, oh yeah, this should definitely be the highest grossing movie ever. I could see why people just went to see this over and over again. You don't totally get that watching on TV. You're like, it's a pretty good movie, you know?
Yeah.
Or you're like, yeah, I really like that. But it was all about the theatrical experience. When I saw this movie in 2009, I mean, you thought 3D was going to be something it did not turn out to be in the next decade. You know what I mean? I just have never had a more enjoyable experience watching a movie in a movie theater. I think I saw it like 3 times. I saw it in IMAX. It was just so cool. You know what I mean? And I had a life at the time. I was older. I wasn't like a kid who just went to the movies all the time. So It just made you believe 3D was going to change what movies were. And I think for even years afterwards, I kept going to 3D movies, trying to get even a piece of that experience again. And it never came close for me anyway. So I don't know if when Avatar 2 comes out in 2020, maybe we'll get that a little bit again. But Avatar Mania was a real thing in 2009. It was just like nothing I had ever seen before.
Yeah, I agree. That was a huge part of 2009. And I felt the same way. You know, I felt the same way about the experience there, going to the movie and seeing it in 3D. And you're right. You tried to recreate that for years afterwards, but nothing was quite the same. And, you know, the movie still holds up, which is odd for 10 years later. But again, one of those things that I think time is not very friendly to movies like that. You know what I mean? Over time, it starts to look dated. It starts to look fake.
Like special effects movies?
Yeah, because there's no practical effects most of the time. It's all CG animated. And but that movie, I think, still holds up pretty well for the most part. But yeah, I agree. That was a big part of 2009. Pop culture-wise, in movies and television, tons of vampires in Hollywood. So you got the Twilight series that is happening then. You got True Blood. You've got Vampire Diaries, Underworld 3, Being Human on the BBC. Daybreakers with Ethan Hawke was a movie. Let the Right One In, which a lot of people know is a horror movie. Just tons of vampires.
Of course, Twilight.
Yeah.
The love and the backlash were in full force in 2009.
Yeah.
And that's when the second movie in the series came out, made almost $300 million. It was a big thing, you know, it was a big thing. And it's one of those things that became so popular, you had to either love it or hate it.
Yeah.
So.
It was like the movie version and the literary version of the New Kids on the Block. You either loved them or you hated them.
Exactly. Because there was so much of it.
Yeah. The other big thing, which I loved of that year, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, that raked in over $250 million with a budget of $150 million. Awesome movie if you haven't seen that, but that was a big one.
You mentioned Star Trek. I would say, looking through the list, 2009, pretty great movie year. Let me throw this out to you. So we have Avatar, Star Trek, District 9, Inglourious Bastards, Zombieland, I Love You Man, 500 Days of Summer, Up in the Air, Drag Me to Hell, Moon, The Hangover, Watchmen, It Might Get Loud. Those are just some of the movies that I really liked that came out that year. I thought that's a pretty good list.
Yeah.
That's pretty quality. And then last thing I'll say, great year for female sung pop songs. All the Single Ladies, Beyonce, Party in the USA, Miley Cyrus, Poker Face and Just Dance, Lady Gaga. And you also have hits by Taylor Swift and Katy Perry. There are just a ton of them. They still get played all the time. You still hear these songs over and over. So big year for female pop.
Yeah, that's a great list. Overall, I think for being as difficult as it was, I think we have a pretty good list there of a variety of things. And we had some overlap, but I don't know if we had a ton of overlap.
No, I actually would have thought there would be more overlap. So it's a good trip down memory lane. You talk about some of this stuff and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. It's fun to remember.
Yeah. 10 years doesn't feel really like nostalgia other than it's just like, really? That was 10 years ago?
Yeah. Spoiler alert, throughout the year, we're going to have these flashbacks where we go back a little farther. So this is just the first in that series.
Yes. So on that note, let's get our final nugget of human wisdom.
Human wisdom.
Today's nugget of human wisdom comes from a New York Times article by Stuart Elliott, published on April 6th, 2009. The title of that article, Warm and Fuzzy Makes a Comeback. Here's what Elliott writes in the article. What can calm worried consumers during an economic crisis? Madison Avenue believes one answer is nostalgia. As the recession continues taking its toll, marketers are trying to tap into fond memories to help sell what few products shoppers are still buying. The time machine tactics are primarily evoking 4 decades, the 1950s through the 1980s. The hope is that warm, fuzzy feelings about the past will help make people feel better about the present and future. It's about yearning for the past, a simpler time, even though the 60s and 70s were not simple, said Frank Cooper, Chief Marketing Officer for Sparkling Beverages at Pepsi-Cola, North America Beverages unit of PepsiCo. They just seem simple, looking back, he added. And I thought this was interesting because it shows, one, how marketers were focusing on nostalgia back in 2009 to take people away from their worries of the moment. Kind of like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And it also shows how we simplify the past in memory. It's why nostalgia can be such a powerful marketing tool. It's easier for the brain to deal with a simplified version of the past than it is the complex reality of the present.
It's true. And you always romanticize the past, right? So when you romanticize the past, it's easy for advertisers and marketers to say, remember how much you loved that? This is going to be just like that love you had.
Remember how great 2009 was? You were playing the Wii, you were watching Avatar, every day was a good time.
That would be an awesome commercial. I would love to watch that commercial. Having like those blue Avatar people playing on the Wii, but they just keep crushing the controllers in their hands.
Another one of the Avatar guys is like, stop talking to me, I can't concentrate, I'm trying to scan this QR code.
Yeah. And then the other blue avatars are dressed up like Twilight characters. And they're like, oh, look, I look like I'm a diamond in the sunlight. I don't actually turn to ash in the sun like all other vampires. I just look really crystally. Yeah, that's good stuff. I like that. That's a good commercial. We need to make that.
Got to come out immediately.
Make it happen. Yeah, it's a good final nugget of human wisdom. And, you know, nostalgia, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Nostalgia, I think, is one of those things makes the world a better place, right? I mean, when you think back, that's what people have done since the beginning of time. You sit down with a few friends, they reminisce. Oh, I remember 20 years ago when we were doing this, you know, and it's a time where you sort of romanticize it, but for a marketing and advertising or a business side of things, you're doing the same thing. You're romanticizing that time period for that person so that they buy that product. It just feels good. It's warm and fuzzy.
It works, you know? We can look back and we went through it. We survived it. Everything turned out okay. That makes it okay to look back on it in a rosy way.
Yeah.
Right now, we're looking ahead. We don't know what's coming. We don't know what's going to happen to us. We don't know if we're going to make it. That's kind of scary. It's a little easier to look back and be like, remember, we went through that. That part was okay. Let's think about the good times.
We survived that. And everyone, that's it for today's flashback episode to 2009. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast on our website. Guess what our website is, everyone? It's speakinghuman.com. Very easy. While you're there, read some articles, or we call them stories. Watch some videos, or just stare longingly at our beautiful site design.
Another person falling in love with our website. Great.
Yay.
Tweet us your Tweet us your marketing memories from 2009. What brands, ads, or products from that time period stick out in your mind? Let us know using the hashtag 2009relics. You can find us at speaking_human on Twitter. That's at speaking_human on Twitter. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking human.